Welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Critters. For those of you that, it's going to take a couple seconds, people will start joining.
Okay.
But I'm here with Deb Jones,
Hi.
great friend, professional dog trainer, psychologist. What else are you?
That's it. That's it. Person who needs coffee.
Yeah, so this is actually Deb Jones' second time doing Coffee with the Critters.
Yes, we did it last year when I was here visiting.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Hi.
People.
Rico's like, hi.
Ooh, people coming in.
Yep,
How
people
exciting.
coming in. So there's Candy from last
Oh,
night.
okay.
The seafood.
Hi, Candy.
Morning, everybody.
Food was good last night.
Yes, very good. Anyway, so welcome to another episode of Coffee with the Critters. We got there's Pat.
Hi, Pat.
There's several things we want to. There's Susie. There's several things we want to talk about. Our topic today is going to be we're going to discuss classical conditioning. But I wanted to introduce Deb Jones first, and for those that have never been on this episode, I think we're going on 2.5 years every Sunday morning. 2.5 years. There's Mano, yay! There's Mano that has Bellatrix.
With Bellatrix.
So those of you in level 2 saw that Bellatrix is now flying to the glove, and I'll go over and show her in a second. But for those of you that are new, my name is Lara Joseph. I'm owner of the Animal Behavior Center. We're an international educational center where we teach people about using applied behavior analysis and positive reinforcement with animals, and we do that through our live streams. So, and once again, I'll introduce, this is Deb Jones. She's a professional dog and other animal trainer.
I guess so. I've trained more than one species.
Yeah, and she
Animal trainer.
She seems to be taking a liking to Coco this morning.
Just a little bit. Coco's awfully friendly, noisy, and active. Maybe it's like he reminds me of a border collie a little bit. So
And you and I talked about that several
why.
years ago. I was like, cockatoos are the border collies of the bird
and I'm
world.
somehow drawn to that.
Yeah. So that means we have 3 cockatoos here. One is right there watching us, like he usually does. Yep, sitting on his station. But like I said, this is Deb Jones. I've known you for 4 years.
I think so. Yeah, I came here when you first had a workshop here one summer, and I sort of just wouldn't go away. I'm like, okay, I'm hanging around her. And every time you get a chance, I'm coming and hanging around here some more, whether you really invite me or not. And it's like, I'm coming.
Yeah, and my door is always open to you. So we've become good friends through the years. And when we sit down and talk, it's just like last night at dinner. It's behavior.
Exactly.
As my husband sat there and was like,
poor Freddie.
I know.
He's like, just eat my dinner and not, I don't know what you two are talking about. I don't think he has any idea. It's like a foreign language to him.
No. He has no idea what I do out here. And that's okay. That's why I always say, your house, my greenhouse.
That works?
Yes. And it works. It does work.
Seems to work very, very well. Yeah, so we get our chance to be really geeky with behavioral stuff. And
I know.
Talk about all this as much as we want to for a day or so.
We
Go back.
should do something like go somewhere, whether it's for vacation or training somewhere, and we can just do behavior geek talk the whole time.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. Like
Yeah.
a whole behavior vacation.
Yeah.
Something to think about in the future.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So something else, we'll mention it at the end of the live stream too, but Deb and I have some work we're going to be doing together.
Yeah, very excited about it.
Yeah.
We're talking about at least doing a webinar for sure, or maybe probably more than one, because every idea has more ideas. So doing some webinars, and then possibly those would become in-person seminars or workshops as well as we go through and see how popular they are and how well they work. And I have a feeling we'll work pretty well together.
I have a feeling. I know we will.
And I think we'll have a lot of fun with it. So I wrote a whole bunch of ideas down on my phone when we were talking last night, because I knew we'd forget them if I didn't.
I know. This morning I was like, what did we talk about?
It was brilliant. What was it? So yeah, lots of behavior ideas. Trying to be sciencey, but not too sciencey.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Because behavior works. It's always happening all around us, and that kind of leads us. Hey, look who's looking at us. Bellatrix.
Oh, okay.
Touch. Good.
Like targeting. Okay, I'll never get the right thing. Never mind.
Yeah, so
that's
she's
bad.
She's staring at us. But hey, Allison, good morning. Hey, Crystal.
Wow.
So we're going to get started talking about classical conditioning, but before I start, should I show Bellatrix?
Yeah, why don't you do?
Okay.
Let everybody see how awesome she looks. Oh, she just flew off her perch.
Did she
There's
she
back on her
is.
perch.
Okay.
Do
How's
you
that?
need me to move this?
Nope.
Hold this?
I'll just take this over
Okay.
here real quick, and I'll. So, those of you that have been following my work with Bellatrix in level 2, the Bellatrix project. This is Bellatrix, the Eurasian eagle owl. Hi, Rico. Bellatrix, the Eurasian eagle owl, and we have her stepping on and off the glove. And as of yesterday, she is now flying to the glove. So. We'll work on getting her flying to the glove, and then the next thing I'm going to work on getting her flying back to a perch. So Deb, saw Bellatrix for the first time yesterday, and isn't she a lot bigger in person?
She's huge. I knew she would be big because they're the biggest owl, right? I mean,
I believe so.
I know
yeah.
very little about owls, but I've heard that.
Yeah.
So but I'm still kind of amazed at the size of her. She's like the size of a toddler or something. I mean,
Yeah.
she's pretty big.
You can see how big she is in relation standing next to you.
Yeah, she's pretty huge, and she's very vocal. She's making a lot of little noises, which I didn't realize they would do.
Yeah, so we talked about it last week, that the Eurasian eagle owl, she's Quincy. See what Quincy does. Quincy,
And then
come here.
Bellatrix is looking at her.
Yeah. So she's still pretty young, but she's pretty big.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine how much bigger she's going to get.
Yeah, they get almost 3 feet tall with over a 6 foot wingspan. Yeah.
Wow. So you said she's young.
Yeah. So that is an animal. Not that you wouldn't want to use positive reinforcement, but that is an animal you definitely want to make sure you are using positive reinforcement with, because when she gets full grown, she could be very dangerous.
And those talons alone, those are pretty impressive.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want to do anything that is going to be unpleasant to her if you don't have to.
Yeah, so we're pairing everything, which this is a good introduction into classical conditioning.
I was just going to say that.
We're pairing.
We're kind of moving that way.
Yep, pairing everything with as positive as possible. Mm-hmm. So if I want her flying to that glove, that has to be paired with a positive reinforcer. Right. Otherwise, you could possibly punish that behavior or quickly turn that glove into an aversive.
Yeah, and once you do that, then you're really stuck because you don't have any choices if you can't change the way she feels about it.
Yep.
She's always going to be hesitant or reluctant. Then what are you going to do? Force her.
Right.
Yeah, and then it's going to get worse, and then it's a downhill spiral very quickly.
And once you start forcing them, then you see the stress that it does on the body, and you can tell when an owl is stressed.
Yeah.
And that's not a good message to the audience.
No, it's not. It wouldn't be a good message at all to people that we have to force them to do these things.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
And I don't know how prevalent kind of negative reinforcement is in wild animal work, putting pressure on them to get them to do something you want. But it takes its toll over time, I would think. Even if it works, which it might work,
right?
It takes its toll in terms of then the classical conditioning part, because they are not happy to be doing anything or even tolerant of it.
Right.
You know, so.
Right. And yeah, we want to go sit down and roll. Okay.
We'll leave poor Bellatrix alone here. I'll go back to my little stool. Let's see if I manage to not fall down.
Let's get into classical conditioning, talking about that.
Yeah. And if people have questions, we can answer those.
Absolutely.
Because it's a little of a confusing area for some people.
Yeah.
To think about it.
So when talking about classical,
and we wait.
in talking about any comments on old school falconry style differs from classical conditioning?
We'll kind of talk about what classical conditioning is, and I think hopefully the difference will become clear in terms of how you go about it.
Yep. So classical conditioning is a way of learning, and by pairing neutral stimulus with a primary positive reinforcer. Hey, Puff. Hey, everybody. So like with Pavlov, the ringing of the bell was paired consistently, and jump in at any time if you want.
Let you go. Yeah, bell, food, bell, food, bell, food.
That pairing together, and then just when the dogs would just hear the bell, the salivation would start.
Right. So with classical conditioning, you don't have, your animal or your subject doesn't have to do anything. Operant conditioning, we're looking for them to do a behavior so we can reinforce it. But with classical conditioning, we are instilling an emotional response. They don't have to do anything except take our food. And sometimes that's tricky. If they're too stressed, they can't take our food, we can't classically condition them.
Yeah.
And so we have to start where they're comfortable. If we try to push them too hard, they're uncomfortable, they won't take the food, we cannot cause classical conditioning to happen. So we have to have our animals in a state where they're at least neutral before we start with classical conditioning, because fear and stress will inhibit it greatly. So we, for example, I know what you're working with Bellatrix is the glove. And basically, see the glove, get food, see the glove, get food, so that glove, she's like, yeah, that's always a good thing. Every time I see that, it's now a signal that something good is going to happen for me. And you can't really separate classical and operant conditioning. They always happen together. There's no way that you can just do one or the other truly. But we just tend to focus more on classical conditioning, and I tend to focus more on that first, because it's not just are they doing what I want, it's how they feel about what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so if they're doing it but they're really unhappy about it, that's just digging a bigger and bigger hole. Okay. How does that work with dating? That, if I could figure that out, I would be retired a long time ago. That is the question, isn't it? But it's something to think about, because it does work with all creatures.
It does.
Yeah.
And when I first started working with Bellatrix, I had to just introduce myself to her. So every single time I would walk in, I'd put that leather glove on and I would just feed her. Right. And I'd have that leather glove on, just feeding her. So then, and I would start, I believe I started feeding her with the actual leather glove.
Oh, okay.
And
so
then
the glove feeds you.
Yep.
Yeah.
So then, over time, I would do that, I did that like 10 times a day. Just constantly walking in, and all I would do is walk up and feed her. Then she would start to see the leather glove sits on that table right there. She'd start to see me walk up, put the leather glove on, she'd fly to the perch closest, and she sits there and does that noise. Because it's become a very consistent and strong predictor that good things are going to happen for her, right? As opposed to predictors of bad things happening to us. If you're going to force her to do something, that glove might become an aversive very, very quickly. Sure.
That when I see that, the next thing they do is try to pull me or drag me. I don't know. I don't even know what she would do there. Don't ask me. Yeah, she's flying around a little bit over there right now. But we want to think about the signal that particular situation or thing is sending. So in the case of Bellatrix, the glove should be signaling reinforcement's now available. Good things are about to happen for you. And so she should have a positive response to that rather than reluctance.
Yep. And the way that could blow up in my face otherwise with forcing is she's now seeing me put the leather glove on, she flies to the perch closest to me. Whereas if it went the other direction, she sees me put the leather glove on and she flies to the perch furthest from me.
Yeah, and that you definitely, then you know you're going down the wrong path. Yeah. It's pretty easy to tell. The animals are pretty honest and obvious usually in their responses. So you can tell if your classical conditioning is going well or not. Man.
That's Coco.
Yes, it is.
That's Quincy.
Oh my gosh. We shouldn't be laughing at this probably, but oh my goodness. Yeah, Coco's quite the character. He's just full of himself all the time, trying to make something happen.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. He's a bird. Coco is probably in his late 20s, came to us from a zoo, and he's going to reside here until I find an appropriate home, or we just bought him a nice gargantuous cage. I'm willing to let him stay here for the rest of his life.
I love how Quincy reacts to him with a little soft howling, like, okay.
Hi,
Rico. I keep wanting to say Rocky. Wow, Bellatrix has just been going back and forth over there.
That may be what Coco's screaming about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm going to go give Coco something else to do.
That's a good plan. I almost feel what that noise is.
So yeah, a lot of people are commenting. My dog is trying to figure out where that noise is coming from. Yeah, sorry about that. Let me go give this to Coco.
Okay. So while she's doing that, let's see, which will take her like 1 second. In terms of classical conditioning then, we keep going back to that. So if we start with something neutral, so what happens sometimes is the thing we're starting with is already aversive or unpleasant. And then you're in a hole before you ever start. So if the glove had been unpleasant to Bellatrix and she was avoiding it, it's simply going to take you a whole heck of a lot longer to change that opinion. And sometimes you can't totally change it. You might have to do things like try changing to a different glove or try presenting it in a different way. Sometimes the object or the place gets poisoned. We would say that it becomes poisoned. Yeah. And then no matter what you do with it, it's already triggered that emotion. So the emotion happens, their thought process then comes well after that, and so they can't think anymore when they have this feeling or this emotion. It's like if you don't like the dentist and you go in the dentist's office, the emotion happens. You can tell yourself all you want that it's not a bad thing, but your body's already reacted to it.
And that's one of the 4 main side effects of using aversives to control behavior.
Right.
Is that overgeneralized fear response.
Right. For not only that object, but then maybe it would drift to people because they're with the object, and then different similar objects. So then you've got a lot of fear developing.
Even the smell.
Or anxiety, yeah. Smell, anything they can perceive. So you get all this anxiety developing. All of that's going to inhibit the ability to learn.
Yeah.
You cannot learn when you're stressed and anxious. There's just no way that can happen. Somebody says here, my dog hates going to the vet and gets emotional and can't think anymore, just reacts. Yeah. That's exactly what happens. By the time you get into the vet's office, if this has already happened, and you didn't want it to happen, you didn't cause it to happen, the connection of this place, something I'm not certain about, maybe something unpleasant happens to me. It doesn't take more than one incident sometimes, and you've got this connection happening. We talk about one-trial learning. And with one-trial learning, usually you have to repeat something over and over and over again to learn it. But with one-trial learning, something that's connected to strong emotion happens, and you're done. You have learned this thing. And getting rid of it you may never really totally get rid of it. It's going to be something you'll always have to fight to get them back to normal. Okay? And so that kind of segues into my book that I'm working on, the idea of the dog going to the vet, which is my book on cooperative care, that one of these days I'll be finishing. One of these days I'll be finishing. Yeah, that'll happen soon. The book's written, the pictures are taken, putting it all together and editing it. My least favorite part. I like writing it.
Yeah.
I love writing it. Don't like editing it so much, but we'll get that done. I'll get a second here. Oh, that's super. What was I going to say? Oh, cooperative care. So yeah, and part of the reason I thought about writing this book, which is strongly connected to classical conditioning, completely connected to classical conditioning to start, is when you have all these animals that you have to care for, there are things we have to do to them, often whether they want us to or not. And so
I can probably fix this. Well, fix this.
That sounds a little...
change this behavior.
Fix this. What are you thinking?
Coco's calling for Quincy.
Oh.
So I'm thinking about, I definitely don't want to reinforce the screen.
She's eating
She's eating first.
Oh, okay.
I can do this.
Okay.
For the sake of this live stream.
For this, okay, well, I'll take over.
Okay.
I'm in charge. I don't know what to do here. I'm not used to being in charge of something like this, so I will just talk a little bit more. So yeah, talking about cooperative care. So the idea, and I've seen it, part of the reason I talk about it is I've seen it here with Lara so much. I've seen it with other places, like I've been to Shed Aquarium and a few other facilities, and they work every day on making the animals feel comfortable with any physical thing that you might have to do to them. Because there are going to be times when you see when something just has to be done. We know whenever we just force an animal to do it, whatever it is, and even if it's necessary and life-saving, if we just force them to do it, we have set our training way back. And so now we're back like below baseline or below zero. And we're going to have to start or continue with our classical conditioning. It's not it's a never-ending thing. You've never done it. You're always in the process of doing it because experiences change those emotions one way or the other. Things you never anticipated, or even if you did, you had to do it anyway. That's a little quieter. I hate to say anything. Don't wish she's whispering.
Stuck her foraging toy next to Coco's cage.
Oh, but she brought it back over here.
I know, she keeps bringing it back.
She just brought it back over here. So it's something we're always thinking about with animals, that we want them to be as happy and comfortable with what we must do to them as possible. And in every species, I think there are things that people just do. Like I know with birds, you towel them, is that correct? Mm-hmm. And with cats, they do that a lot too.
And
you towel them.
And we train to accept a towel.
Yes, exactly. We did this with my cat because I knew he had to go to the vet and get a rabies shot, and then he ended up having to go back in and have a dental done. And so I knew that the towel, and actually the towel seemed to be very comforting to him at the vet's office. They put the towel over him and he burrowed under it. He didn't even seem to notice that he got a shot. Yeah. But working with it ahead of time and him going, oh, this is almost always a really, really good thing, allowed that amount of comfort that he didn't even need to be held to get a rabies vaccine, which is great. Better than, strong arming them and just kind of forcing it on them.
And the time to train this is not when it's time to go to the vet.
That's what everybody, I get emails and messages all the time saying, well, in 2 weeks I have to do this, or my dog needs surgery. I'm like, oh gosh, I wish you had started this from the beginning.
You better get moving.
This is training that you want to start with a puppy or whatever your young animal is. If you start young and keep at it, then when the time comes that the thing has to be done, yeah, it'll be a little setback, but it won't be devastating. And you'll be able to get back to where you were and move on. I worked really hard with the cat going in the crate because I knew he had to go in a crate to go to the vets. And so, of course, what happens then, the crate becomes connected with the vet, so there's classical conditioning happening there. If the vet office is scary and unpleasant, the crate then becomes scary and unpleasant, so they don't want to go into the crate anymore. So I worked.
That pairing.
Yes, that pairing happened. It happens again. I did like 15 sessions with the crate, and one time going to the vet does set you back. Well, I thought it would set me back. So I did it, and then when the day came, the cat does go in the crate. He goes to the vet. He's not happy, but he's not freaked out because he's also got his towel and things went well. We come home. I open up the crate. He jumps out, turns around and jumps right back in, waits for cooking. And I'm like, wow. Yeah. Like, I'm surprised I'm still always surprised because it's sort of magical that it worked. So he didn't lose anything, even though I had to take a big withdrawal out of that bank account of the crate being a good place, classically conditioned good place.
And with you saying that too, I just started training Cello, our roller pigeon, to go into a crate. So if I take too big of steps, even those two biggest steps in my shaping process, I can easily poison the crate, poison
pressured,
and aversive. So with my training, my shaping steps were so small and always paired with positive, high rates of positive reinforcers. So after 3 days of training Cello to go in the crate, he was going in and out. When he saw me walk into the center, he would fly down and sit on his crate.
Yeah, because now the crate, always a good thing. Yeah. So if it's a good thing 1,000 times, the 1 or 2 times it's not a good thing, you can get by with. But if the only time the crate comes out is when it's time to go to the vet, No.
Yeah.
That's why, yeah. No, that's not good. That's why dogs who never go anywhere but the vet don't really want to get in the car when the time comes, because that could be unpleasant. That's consistently paired with unpleasant things. Okay?
And a lot of the animals we have here at the Animal Behavior Center, we don't have the luxury of getting them as very young. I mean, Bellatrix young, I was like, woo, cake.
It's so much easier
candy.
when they're young. Exactly. It's true that, it's not true that you can't train an older animal. You certainly can, but gosh, it's so much easier to put the first impression in rather than to change the first impression.
And that's like I said, like I saw Allison was in here, she's from the Autism Model School. In the workshop we did last week, I always say, once you learn 2 + 2 = 4, you can't forget it.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. It's not going to ever be erased. And whatever your initial learning is, you can't just get it out of their minds or their bodies or their emotions. It's always going to come back.
With a lot of the animals we have here, here at the center, I train primarily exotics, and that's I enjoy training exotics for several different reasons. Deb, because the proof is in the pudding. I love training exotics because they can be very dangerous and they can hurt you.
Yeah.
And if you're pairing yourself with force, coercion, aversives to train, you are putting your life in danger.
Yes, you are.
So
you are.
that's, I mean, in training exotics, that's why I like to, because the message is so clear and it's there. But what I was going to say is a lot of the animals here already have that history of force aversives, coercion aversives. So it makes, like I said, I don't have a lot of luxury of training young, but when I do, I'm on it.
Yeah.
And
yeah, that's a gift. That's
yeah.
a definite gift that you have. If you can get it in early and often, it will always pay off you, and your animal will be so much less stressed in so many situations. It's definitely worth it.
It's not that you can't change that history of reinforcement of however that animal was raised, because a lot of them we don't get till they're 10 years old, 15 years old. Then you've got 15 years of you trying to counter condition what that animal's already been learned.
Exactly. It's not going to change overnight.
Yeah.
Or for the vet visit next week.
Exactly.
It's just not going to happen that fast. The consistency. She's in a crate down there. Speaking of crates. Speaking of crates, it's amazing to me.
Yeah. So what I
When she's tearing up something.
Yeah. What I want to do, we're going to work with, Bella already knows to go in the crate, but I want to keep that very strong. I've been focusing the past 2 weeks flying to the glove. Next, what I want to start doing is, bam, mixing in the crate with getting fed in there as well. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, that's okay.
We were talking about, I do want to talk a little bit about counter conditioning, because I don't want people thinking that if they already have this, you can teach an old dog new tricks.
Yeah, you can change things, but you do have sometimes a very long road, and you will have setbacks, and you will have those times it just looks like you're not making any progress. But if you're doing it correctly, if you're executing what the protocol for changing properly, change will happen. It might be slow and incremental, but change will happen. My example for that is my Border Collie Star. And Star, through a series of unfortunate events, ended up at the vet getting spayed when I was out of town and couldn't be there. And it was apparently quite traumatic for her. I don't know the whole story of what happened, but it wasn't good. Then she was not only scared of anybody touching her, she was particularly scared of men. So things did not go well for her. And this came out most strongly with other people, but also in me trying to handle her feet. Left front leg in particular, which is my guess is where they put an IV in her. And so handling her legs and feet, then she became very, very resistant to that. So either I could fight that and fight her and just insist that we do nails, which I did not want to do, because now I have a 2-3-year-old dog that I'm going to fight with every week for the rest of her life. Or I could work on changing her response. I could make it better. So that was my approach, which is you've got to work where the animal's comfortable. You cannot push them too hard. If you see resistance, a lot of people say they have to know they don't have a choice. And I say, no, they always have a choice. If they're resisting, I'm doing too much. I need to allow them to back away a little bit. I need to allow them to let me know so that I can adjust. Resistance tells me I've pushed too far.
Sure.
I've put too much pressure on that animal.
It's a clear form of communication.
Yes, very clear. So if I reach out to grab her foot and she pulls it away, okay. So I might just reach out but not touch her. Just put my hand towards her feet, hand towards her feet, hand towards her feet, till my hand moving towards her then becomes a signal or a predictor of good things. Then I can hand a little further, eventually to the point where I can actually touch her, eventually to the point where I can put my hand around her leg, pick it up. That takes a long time, there is no question. And if you push too hard, if I just reach in one day and grab her, okay, she's going to react. She's going to back off again. That doesn't mean my training isn't working. It means that I tried to jump ahead someplace where I shouldn't have. So, but in the whole process of this has gone on. I've worked on this for a year. So what am I going to do with her nails in the meantime? Because nails need to be cut weekly.
Yeah.
So I have to do what I have to do. But then I immediately have to go back and work on my classical conditioning. I do just enough to get the job done. I try to change the whole process, do it in a different place, do it in a different way, then go back to my classical conditioning that's going to be there.
Yeah.
And rambling on now.
Like we were talking yesterday, I know you've got a book coming out on cooperative care. A lot of the work that I do here, because we have so many animals here, it's constantly husbandry.
Yeah, that seems like that's your job.
Yeah.
That is what you do all the time. And most pet people don't do that.
Yeah.
I think it's something that's really, really ignored with pet people and to some extent with performance people. We might train a lot of behaviors for a sport or an activity, but we're definitely not doing, okay, I'm going to need to be able to look in your ears, or I'm going to need to be able to put eye drops in, or maybe someday I'll need to do this.
Yeah.
There are things that, yeah, maybe they need, maybe they never do. So, but if they need them, you'd be very, very pleased if you have worked up to it. So it's not a big deal, okay?
Yep.
Star, the other thing about Star, she's a little high maintenance in terms of her cooperative care. She needs her anal glands cleaned weekly, expressed. And yes, you can take them to the vet and do it, and it costs a lot of money. And there's an extra added stress then of strangers doing things behind you. I ended up having to learn how to do it myself, which the vet taught me and YouTube taught me. And then also working her towards being able to do that particular thing. So now when I tell her it's time, she jumps up on the table because there's always squeezed cheese and it's not so unpleasant, and we move on and we can do it weekly. So that's the kind of thing that you never know what your animal's going to need. How many animals we hear about need injections, or they need IVs at home. So one of our older dogs, Saber, had kidney disease, and he needed IVs weekly, bi-weekly, then it got to every day. And to take him to the vet, again, expensive and a little more traumatic, though Saber didn't much care, but some dogs would. But learning to do it at home ourselves and making it comfortable enough that they cooperate with us.
Yep.
Makes everybody happier.
I was at a zoo last Sunday that wants me to come and start working with them and training. I've been asked specifically to train all their giraffe and their zebras for vet exams.
Oh, excellent.
So he showed me where the giraffe had, I don't know how tall the giraffe was, but it was pretty tall.
It's pretty tall. I remember trying to feed that one giraffe, and I'm like, realized this is exactly how short I am, because I'm up on my tiptoes, and he's like, no, come on down here, just take your food. Yeah.
So there's a door that he has made specifically for the anticipation of training for a jugular blood draw.
Okay.
So he asked, will you be able to train for a jugular blood draw? And I said, absolutely. So that classical conditioning is going to come in where even just the opening of that door. And
every step.
That giraffe is going to come up and want to stick his head through, so I can ask him to target. And I target my hand to their jugular, and then I just start. In this, you can train an animal to voluntarily accept something that's going to be unpleasant for a short period of time.
Seems likely. People do it all the time.
Yep, and train for take a nasty medication.
Mm-hmm.
But so
on
then
that.
what I start doing is I just start slightly pinching. Bam, high rates of reinforcement, or a bigger reinforcer for accepting the bigger pinch, and then there you go, and you've got
yeah, amazing how they will accept things. There's one video on YouTube that I always like. It's not coyotes, hyenas in a zoo, and they're teaching them to target up to the cage and to take their heads and put like their jugular right up against the cage. So they teach that targeting behavior first, then they come along and they just start poking at them, and pretty soon they're pinching, and the next thing you know they're using an empty syringe and pushing, and eventually you get to the point where they will hold still there while you collect a blood draw from them. You work it in good, solid steps. Okay.
When I, some of the past work that I did, I love working with Dr. Tim Reichert. He's the former Toledo Zoo vet and former San Diego Zoo vet. He would walk me around and just say, this is what I need from this animal for their annual health care. So I know we had to come in and he needed to do certain things with the primates. So I got to work, and he goes, I need blood draws from the arm.
Getting the arm out so that they'll hold it long enough so that you can do that. Which again,
and
you have to break that down into little steps to get there.
You were there.
Yeah, with which is the one that kept reaching out. I can't remember his name.
Xenia.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So we trained Xenia she already knew how to reach out, so that's where we started. So we started, she liked to touch, but she didn't like to be touched. Okay. So I had to train her to touch her hand to my hand, which was a target, which is how I got her to start putting her arm out. And then I slowly started she started allowing me to touch her because I was pairing it with banana baby food.
Yeah, I love banana baby food.
That was the only time she got banana baby food, was when it was time for this training. So when I taught her to station, go to an area, sit there, and she would see me walking out with the syringe, and she was already...
Exactly, because we know now. So we've gone from classical to operant conditioning. We've kind of eased into it.
Sorry.
That's okay. No, because it's all part of it. That is the same thing. We still care very much how they feel about what they're doing. We still care that it's all pleasant. But now, instead of just food for something, we're asking them to actually do a behavior or allow a behavior to be done to them. So that gets then that's why we can never separate them. They kind of always end up going together. But we still should care a lot how they feel about what we're doing to them, because that's always the important question. If you don't pay attention to that part, your animals their behaviors are going to degrade, and their reactions are going to degrade. Is that Rocky's?
Yeah, that's Rocky.
That's the rock star.
Deb's
this is my
boyfriend.
rock star back there.
Yeah.
Yes, and I'm giving him attention for the wrong thing.
Nope, I mean, the whistle
that's acceptable.
And the peekaboo is cool.
Okay. Hi, Rocky. I can talk to you now. Look at you.
So maybe after this live stream, we get Rocky out on your lap.
Oh my gosh, my boyfriend.
So Adrian says that was the important part. Sorry, allowing her to touch your arm instead of making her tolerate your touch.
Yeah, and you work on both, actually. I'd work a little bit on, I can reach over and touch you. Here you go, have a cookie, touch you. Or I can reach you, have a cookie. But at the same time, in different sessions, it'll also be, okay, if you offer me your body part, then I'm also going to start reinforcing that. With Star, we had to switch also because she didn't like her left front leg touched. Getting blood draws out of that leg became a fight. And it's like, is there any other way to do this? Well, we could take blood out of the jugular, or we could take it out of the saphenous vein in the back leg. So we worked very hard on the back leg then because she didn't mind that as much. And worked with, getting her up on a table, pinching that leg, reinforcing her. When we went into the vet and actually did the blood draw, I could swear she never even noticed anything happened.
Yeah.
Because we're busy with feeding the squeezed cheese up front, and the blood was done. And it's like, oh, okay. So, and less trauma for all of us.
There's a very happy vet visit.
Yes, exactly. So another plus, another win for the time when something might not be so pleasant, when they might actually be hurt or sick, or they're going to just have to restrain them and do something that needs to be done. So sometimes that happens.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing this. We're getting a lot of shares today.
Oh, good.
So here's something that may go along the lines of classical conditioning. Like with a lot of animals, identifying reinforcers, but then if you're constantly pairing yourself with the delivery of the animal's positive reinforcer, what I find almost 99.9% of the time is pretty soon the opportunity to be with you becomes a reinforcer.
Yes, definitely. If you're doing it right, you have become the main predictor of good things that are going to happen next. And they don't even know what those good things might be, but you're always paired with pleasant stuff. So anything that you're doing, they're likely to go, okay, it's weird, it's strange, but okay, it's worked out well for me in the past. Yeah. And I think that's when we start to talk about, in dogs, we start to talk about forming a working relationship with them. And I think a big part of it is that classical condition part. They see doing something with me as the best thing they can imagine because it's always been paired with good stuff. It's never been paired with something unpleasant. If there's any way on earth I can help it, it's never been paired with something unpleasant.
And that's why you hear us say here, be the animal's deliverer of awesomeness.
That's you're saying, and that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. Well, if you're the one, then anything you want to do, they are much more likely to go along with very easily, as opposed to being suspicious or concerned when you approach them. And if they start to get suspicious, your next step is flight. Get away from them and try to make some space for yourself.
Yep. And there's something else I also say is people say the animal's unpredictable.
Okay.
Learn to read that body language. If you are finding yourself in a situation where you're saying an animal's unpredictable, imagine how the animal feels about you.
That's very true.
You're probably unpredictable.
That is very true.
And I say if you're nervous, if with a lot of the animals here, you could be put in dangerous situations. But I'm like,
quickly.
if you're nervous, it's because you're not sure if that animal's going to bite you. If you are pushing that animal, if you're not sure, and I just say back up to a spot in your training where you're calm and comfortable, because there you're sending a clear line of communication. If you're nervous, it's because you're not sure if you're going to get bit. If you're not sure you're going to get bit, you're pushing that animal past its comfort level, or you might be. Now you may have signs of aggression on an intermittent schedule.
Yeah, and that's the last thing you wanted to happen.
And there's where you get your unpredictability. Because you are being unpredictable.
I agree. And being able to read that animal's body language, even in the same species, behaviors can be slightly different, and signs can be different. You see them more clearly in some animals than others. And so I know that one of the things I always do here is I'm just watching these animals all the time, trying to figure out, because I don't know cockatoos very well in particular, like, what does that mean? I'm always asking, what does that mean? Because it's little, it's small. But if you don't see that, we'll say they bit out of nowhere, and it's like, oh no, if you know that species of that animal, they probably gave you 50 signs that they were going to bite before it got to that point. But catching them is hard, and sometimes they are very, very subtle. Things are not under, you can't always see everything, it's not 100%, but you can certainly make things more consistent and more predictable by us understanding our animal.
And that's why when I first start training an animal, I am just standing in front of it, shaping the bridge. Good, bam, good, bam, good, bam. But one of the next things is that Bella playing?
Yeah, she kind of took a flying leap over to the side there.
Yeah, she's got some toys in the bottom of her cage, and she'll look at it and like,
I'm not used to seeing an owl play. That's a totally new experience for me. Which is
probably
really
on the
cool.
ground playing.
We'll give them a second. Somebody's asking about resource guarding, and classical conditioning. I would caution against that because if you're classically conditioning, you're using another resource. You're adding in yet another resource. And so if you already have resource guarding, say, of you, and then you're also adding in food, you can get resource guarding of the food, and then you're getting yourself into trouble. With resource guarding, you really, really have to be much more careful. Wait a second. not to introduce any more kind of competitiveness into this situation, because the animals are already feeling like their resource is threatened. So if now there's food in close proximity to both animals, that could go bad on you really, really fast. Okay? So I'd work more, not so much in classical conditioning there, but I'd work more on operant behaviors. What's an acceptable behavior for you to do? So one of the animals is sitting next to me, the other one has to be on its mat, for example, and switch them back and forth. So I'd be first much more concerned about management and much more concerned about safety before I would try to introduce any sort of a counter conditioning into this. If I could feel like I had safety issues under control, then I might work more on the other dog being close to me is good for you. The other dog being close to me is a sign that you'll get reinforced. But you, again, be careful with that, because I can't give that kind of advice lightly. It's something I'm much more comfortable if you have somebody leading you through, rather than if it's something you try to do on your own sort of halfway, because it can turn around and lead you into a bit of trouble.
Yeah.
So there's a bit more there.
We have resource guarding here. Willoughby, the turkey vulture.
Yeah, kind of sneak
say,
me in the side door here.
Yeah, I always say she is nature's resource guarding is a very natural behavior for them.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the things I train with her is people say that vultures can be very aggressive on the ground.
Okay.
So I will intentionally call her to the ground, ask her to target different places on the ground, ask her to come back up. But yeah, like Deb said, with resource guarding, be careful. That's a little more intense.
Yeah,
and,
that element of aggression that you get in there, you could very unintentionally make it worse by trying to fix it with classical conditioning. So that's not one that I'd be comfortable saying, oh yeah, just throw some cookies at them and it'll be fine, because then you could end up with a major fight over both the cookies and you. So I just want to be careful about that.
Yeah.
And thoughtful about it.
and that's yep.
My water here.
We have there's Milo the pig here, so I mean there's some serious resource guarding right there, and that's right, Rock. That's one of the reasons why I train a station. Like I said, one of the first things I train is a target, because it helps me better understand body language. And then the next thing I usually train is a station. Yeah. And then I'll train all the mammals to go to their stations, because if a piece of food drops on the floor and you have a Rottweiler and a pig coming together to fight,
that doesn't sound good.
They're both going to fight for it.
Yeah, and that's not what you want. Not at all.
So I've intentionally trained everybody's stations, and I drop food. And but that takes time, a lot of observation, and a lot of
control of each animal as well. Yeah. You have to have the stimulus control that you trust the animal to go and stay where you've told them to stay, because if you don't have that, and then you start introducing more of whatever the resource is, you're likely to get going for it and then fights, and the last thing we want is anything bad like that to happen.
Yeah, because something bad like that happens and you go to remove the food, now you're at face level with a dog and a pig and you all coming together.
That doesn't sound like a good day for an animal trainer at all.
It's a mess getting ready to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And with the different species you have, I think you have to think about that more sometimes than we do. Though, dogs can be very, very strong resource guarders at times, but we tend not to think about it a lot, and we get very complacent with it until something bad happens, and then you go, oh my gosh,
like just now, when undesired behaviors happen, that's usually when they get our attention.
Exactly.
But the training should have started a long time ago.
Exactly. It's very natural, and I always say this in my classes and to my students: whatever you pay attention to, you're going to get more of. That's just the golden rule of learning. If I pay attention to that, so if Laura's pay attention to the vocalizing, she's going to get more vocalizing, no matter what she intends to happen. So if you turn and yell at an animal because they're vocalizing, you're just reinforcing them. You don't think you are, but you are.
And attention is a major
Oh my
reinforcer for a lot of social animals.
These guys, these cockatoos in particular, oh my gosh, they just love attention, but many animals do. Maybe, and you'd say maybe there's some species that it's not that important to them. Human attention may not be a big deal for certain species. Though what I've noticed, because I've been doing a lot of cat training lately, and everybody, of course, says cats don't care. Cats are independent, they don't care about people. The more I work with the cat, the more he wants my attention. He follows me around now, and he sits close to me, and it's like, and if I walk over to the table where I train him on, he's up there. So my attention now, again, through classical conditioning, has become very powerful as a reinforcer. I don't believe it was in the beginning. I don't think he much cared one way or the other.
And it's built, this training using these approaches builds such a strong relationship with the animal.
Yes.
Such a strong relationship.
It's amazing.
And you don't need to use food all the time as a reinforcer. It's the opportunity to interact with you. It's the opportunity to be trained. It can become a reinforcer.
It really can. We tend to use a lot of food in the beginning stages with classical conditioning in particular, and with operant, because it's easy. Most animals will work for food. We find it easy to manage, but there are lots of other reinforcers, attention being a very large one. And sometimes what happens is then we just don't get off of the food. We're offering tons of food forever when we really don't even need to. Sometimes it doesn't matter. You can feed an animal as much as you want as long as it's good for them. But if we're going to go into competition, then we're starting to think, okay, how am I going to fade this out and still keep the behavior? And if I've been reinforcing the same thing for 5 years, I've got to have a plan from going to continuous reinforcement to, okay, I'm going to need you to work for 5 or 10 minutes without any reinforcement. Okay? So we have to think about that too in terms of getting away from the food. Many people will criticize positive training and say, what do they call us? Cookie trainers.
Yeah.
We are cookie trainers. I'm like, yeah, definitely, because cookies work. Cookies work exceedingly well.
What's the alternative?
I think the alternative is back to force.
Yeah.
You do it to avoid unpleasant things.
Training being a negative reinforcement.
Yeah, or you can do it to gain what you want. And there's always an internet argument about this. You could get on Facebook any day and find an argument about whether positive training is better than aversive, forceful, or what they sometimes call balance type training. Feel free. I don't want to get in those arguments. And I would actually say, was that Murray?
That's Murray.
Wow. I'm starting to be able to tell them apart, which is really scary. I've been here enough now that I can tell the difference. What was I saying? Then I lose my train of thought because I'm listening
We're
to the
talking
animals.
about, Katina just says, I'm proud to be a cookie trainer.
Oh, okay. So we're...
it shows. When you're watching an animal,
oh my goodness, Murray.
Yeah. He may see a hawk.
Yeah,
He doesn't know his house next to an owl.
They
can't see it.
They both...
it shows in the body language.
Yes.
What type, if you're using positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement.
It does. And you can, if you're a good trainer, you can train any way and get the behavior. But you can't get the relationship. There's no way you can get the relationship if you're using a lot of aversives and pressure and force. And even if you're mixing them together, which is what a lot of people do, they think, I'll do some cookies, but then there comes a point when the animal just has to do it because I said they do. Would you ever say that about a cockatoo?
No.
That's like craziness. Yeah, okay, Rico, you have to do this. Rico's going to say, there's no way. So working with a lot of, and seeing people work with a lot of different species, I'm like, why do we treat dogs so differently? Why do we think dogs can be forced, but all other species will work within their abilities and capacities? Dogs let us get away with a lot of nonsense because they have a good nature.
Yeah, they're pretty resilient.
Or even with Milo, I'm thinking you're not going to be forcing Milo to do a whole
Milo's not going to let you force him.
No. So you have to find other ways to do it.
And this is why I always say, when you know better, you do better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
I used to.
We all used to do things.
We didn't.
It's because we wouldn't now.
That's what was thought. Now science shows better. You know?
Yeah, I mean, we do know it's become more common to use positive reinforcement types of training. We're getting more sophisticated with it. It's not just throw cookies at an animal. It's use food reinforcers very carefully and thoughtfully and selectively in order to get and to change and to maintain the behaviors we want. So we can do a lot more. We've learned over the last, 25 years or so that I've been in animal training, an enormous amount. Because when I started, we were just starting to look at what positive reinforcement training could do. And it was just pretty basic. We didn't get into some of the things that now it's like, wow, you can get amazing stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see through the animal's body language that they want, you're working as a team. It's not just about me, it's about us.
Right, so it's not just what I want you to do. Somebody sounds like a monkey.
Yeah. So I've been working on changing the screen.
Yeah. Interesting screams. Yeah, we tend to think, I want my dog to do this, or I want my animal to do that. But we have to let them have a say in it too. They get some choice in what they will or will not do. So if we let them have that choice, I think people are afraid they're always going to say no. They're going to say, no, I don't want to do what you're trying to teach me. But if we are good trainers and we set it up right, they want to do whatever, as I said before, whatever weird thing we're trying to get them to do that day. They go out of their way to cooperate as opposed to being resistant. But then that also means you have to be a good trainer and not confusing and unclear. And that's a whole other thing. You got to train a lot of animals in order to be a good trainer.
And something I say too is if that animal can see, hear, smell, or feel you, you're training it anyways. It's just what are you training it to do?
Yeah, you always say that,
and
you are always 100% right on that. That they're always learning something. Learning is not just because I'm having a training session. That's not when the learning happens. It's the other 23 and a half hours of the day too that they're learning things.
And that's why I hate that. Did I just say hate? I did. I meant to say, like, when I was a kid, Mom would say, don't say hate. And I was like, okay, I dislike it as much as I would hate it.
Yeah, moms don't like the word hate. Moms don't like it when you say you hate things. But yeah, dislike things, yes.
I very much dislike the label, the terrible twos.
Okay.
Because people are like, you're getting undesired behavior from this puppy or this dog or this bird or whatever. Because it's the age. I'm like, that is the age where so much learning is happening.
Yeah. And you're blaming the animal. You're blaming the animal instead of your training. So yeah, okay, things happen when they're around too that maybe you should be aware of, or with, we often look at adolescents in dogs at about 6, 8, 9 months and go, oh, terrible time. Yes, maybe it is, but that isn't an excuse. If you just say, oh, well, I can't do anything with them because they're at that age.
And then that undesired behavior just gets so much stronger.
Yes. Yeah, detest is another good word, Laura.
Detest, okay. Thanks, Eva.
Detest.
Eva always keeps me on my toes.
That's a nice strong word as opposed to hate.
We
detest certain things.
Yeah.
Talk on using operant training for resource guarding. People must have resource guarding things going on, because that's like the third comment I've seen on resource guarding. And I think we both agree on resource guarding that our first concern is always safety. Always, always, always. And the possibility of making a resource guarding worse, because now I'm an even more valuable resource because I'm sitting here with food. And then the more likelihood
they start resource guarding you.
What we have to very carefully move them into those situations. But first, we simply need to make the other animal a stimulus that good things happen to you. But we have to keep a safety net there for that. So one animal in a crate, the other one out, switch them around. Animals on leashes, kept separated. But making that classical conditioning would go back to making the stimulus more pleasant. Then we would think about, okay, now how am I going to work this in real life? And there are things you can't fix. There are things that animals do or that are in particular animals, and resource guarding looks to be a pretty strong genetic tendency sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen lines of dogs where resource guarding is what it seems to be in them, and you see it from very young. You can train all you want, you can train well, but you cannot change some animals' basic nature. They
Sure.
are what they are.
And, you know, like with Quincy can be a resource guarder. And when I've had Quincy since she was 3 months old, I believe, and she was showing signs around 3-4 months old, and I tried handing her small, feeding her food from my hand, and then then I got another dog.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
That'll solve your problem. No, I'm kidding.
I
Yeah, we
never
all
want a
do
border
that.
collie. I never want another male umbrella. I
I'll
will
never train
an
another
again.
owl. I heard you say that more than once. And I'm like, Laura, I believe you have another owl.
And a male umbrella collie.
And I had to point out to you that you had said you wouldn't, and there you go.
But what it came down to with, I mean, Quincy's resource guarding, and Levi resource guards too. Willie, Coco. Where am I trying to go with this is the fact that you said sometimes you just can't change.
certain things.
So you know what I did? I was just like, why am I? You know what? You just get fed
manage
separately.
it. Yeah, manage it. Management is the easiest first step. Now, management obviously can fail, but if it becomes a habit, it's a little bit easier. If we have resource guarding over dinner, let's feed everybody in separate crates. And we get used to doing that, and they get used to that, and you've avoided having to head-on address a big issue. Okay? So that's always a good thing in my book. That's always a win if we can do some management. Sometimes management and then training, sometimes just management.
And sometimes, like, you see Rocky's ARB, his abnormal repetitive behavior, he's doing that flip. He can see, he sees you, he sees
my
us,
boy.
he wants to get to us, but he can't get to us.
So he's frustrated.
Yeah. That'll happen when he's sees a positive reinforcer that he can't get to.
Okay.
So a lot of times, you hear how Coco's
nice and quiet now.
Yeah.
So she's reinforcing that. Much rather have that than the fire alarm screech. I have no idea why it could be quite so loud.
And the positive reinforcer I'm using is not food. Well, it's Coco screaming for Quincy's attention. So before this, you hear that? That's Coco. That's Coco.
It sounds like a baby now. That is too funny. That is obviously funny.
I'm reinforcing Coco's behaviors that I do want to see, vocalizations I do want to see increase by delivering Quincy.
Yeah.
And I'm tossing food over there to keep Quincy over there, but there's 2 examples. It's about ready to get really loud.
Don't get loud in here.
The crest just went out.
Oh, yeah. More screaming. He's like, okay, I got to join. He's been so good.
I know. And this is
He's
what
been
he
so
does
quiet.
for Coffee with the
He's
Critters.
sitting right there, not making a sound.
So there's 2 examples of using reinforcers to maintain or increase behavior. One is attention, one is food.
Right. So, and Quincy's doing well in all this because she's getting lots of food for basically doing nothing. She doesn't even realize that she's being used as a reinforcer for Coco.
Yep.
But she's happy enough to do it because, hey, you're tossing cookies over there for her.
Yep. Sitting here tossing cookies.
So
Proud
she's
to be a
liking
cookie
that.
tosser.
We might as well be.
Oh, wow, it's after 10.
What the heck?
I know.
This is what happens to us. And then you add some alcohol and it just intensifies the whole thing. So, yeah, this is definitely what happens to us. Okay.
Yeah, so a couple of things before we let you guys go. Pay attention. Deb and I have some upcoming things.
Yes, we're excited about that. It's going to be a blast.
Yes. I'm really excited about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I am very excited to work together.
And if you want to find out, I know like interviews like this and different types of training that we do can always be found in our live streams through our membership program and our projects. You can find that at theanimalbehaviorcenter.com. Deb, how do people get in touch with you?
Okay, so the best way to get in touch with me is probably through Fenzi Dog Sports Academy. dogsportsacademy.com. FENZI, dogsportsacademy.com.
I refer a lot of people to
yeah,
you through
we
Fenzi
have
Dogs.
a lot of instructors, a lot of great instructors, like 40 classes coming up in the next term that starts in October.
Look into them.
Yes. Every instructor is very carefully chosen to be good at what they do and to be kind not only to animals, but to people. And that's a huge thing in animal training, to be kind to everybody involved, and yet to be good and to know what you're doing and be effective. And I am actually offering a cooperative care class that starts October 1st. Registration starts September 22nd. If you look at the website, you can find out all of those things, get that information. And I can't say when the cooperative care book will be out because it's a book. It takes time, but hopefully it'll come out soon.
Yep. So thank you, Beth,
Thank you,
for
Susie.
putting up the
Thank you. Yes, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, and not only my classes, but so many good classes are coming on up there. And we're looking more at things like behavior problems, like separation anxiety kinds of things, and so there's more to see there if you're interested.
I'm laughing because of the evolution of this vocalization in the background.
It keeps changing tone and pitch. It's an interesting thing. We could do a whole study just on Coco's vocalizations.
Yeah.
That would be interesting.
Well, Deb, thanks for doing this live stream.
Thank
Another
you for
Coffee with the
having me
Critters.
here. I loved it. I just love it. Thank you so much.
Good. So we're gonna go pet some animals, maybe do a little training, go to breakfast, and
Yep.
I'd like to welcome you back again.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Bye,
See
guys.
you, everybody.